Hello and welcome to Growing Success, Building an Inclusive K-6 Farm to School program. My name is Dinah Mack. I'm the Education Program Manager with Massachusetts Farm to School. Thanks everyone for coming. And if you're not here for watching this webinar after the date, if you're not familiar with Massachusetts Farm to School, we work to strengthen local farms and fisheries and promote healthy communities by increasing local food purchasing and education in schools. And I'm very excited today for this webinar. Two of my favorite farm to school people. We have Jennifer Reese, the Amherst Pelham Science and Garden Coordinator, and Leela Tunnell, Amherst Pelham Garden Educator. And I'm going to give them the floor. I think that we will have questions. Everyone has access to the chat. So if you have questions during the program, please drop them in the chat. And Jen and Leela will answer them either during or at the end. We have some time for questions. All right, take
Thanks,
it away,
Dinah.
Sue.
Welcome, everybody.
Yes, thanks, Dinah, so much for that intro. We appreciate it. Um, yeah, my name's Jen Reese. I'm the Science and Garden Coordinator at Amherst and Pelham's Public Schools.
And I'm Leela Tunnell, and I am the garden educator. So I work with all of the children K through 6 in Amherst and Pelham in the school gardens and in their classrooms.
And we are going to try to give you an overview of just a little bit of like the structure and history of our program and ways that we've worked to build an inclusive K-6 program in our public schools. And as Dinah mentioned, please feel free to jump in. Like if there's something in the moment that's a question that you need to have addressed for clarity in that moment, please do. And then our intention is to leave a chunk of time at the end so we can check in with each of you and hear about what's going on in your own farm to school spaces and workshop your problems out with you or do a deeper dive into something that feels like it's a topic of interest. So, anything you want to add there, Leela?
That's it. Let's get going.
All right,
Thanks,
great.
Jen.
All right, so the basics of our program. As I said, we work in the Amherst and Pelham Public Schools. We're in Western Massachusetts, just west of central Massachusetts. We've got 4 elementary schools, and we're working with children in grades K through 6, because in Amherst and Pelham, 6th grade is at the elementary level. We have about 1,100 kids across those 4 schools, and they all participate in garden-based learning year round. So it's fall, winter, and spring. And across the 4 school properties, we have about 63 raised beds. Here's just a little snapshot of each of those sites. Elementary is our most recent garden site. So that's a picture of it as we were had just gotten it put together. You can see the beds they're full of soil, but they weren't planted out yet. And then Wildwood, Fort River, and Crocker Farm are Amherst elementary schools, and those are some snapshots. We've got a mix of both cedar raised beds and sort of like modular metal edged raised beds, and also a mix of beds that are about 8 inches tall, and then beds that are higher to be ADA compliant. As far as like who our student population are, I grabbed the data, the most recent data available from DESE on the district profiles. So this is Amherst specific data, and I chose the Amherst data just because Pelham's such a tiny district, and it's just has a different population. So the vast majority of our students are represented in these data from Amherst. And the terms are straight from what DESE uses when they're charting their demographics. So you can take a look there and see that our population we've got many races, many ethnicities represented across our district. And then the next page shows us that these are selected populations that DESE identifies, and they use throughout their data analysis: high needs, English learners, first language not English, low income, and students with disabilities. So our program goals and values, these are really our compass, our North Star. We value equity and access, social justice, agency, empathy, connection to the natural world, systems thinking, and joy. And I'll say a little bit more about some of those, but I want to emphasize that, for when we have been building this program, Leela and I, I feel like we really started with our values and we come back to them regularly throughout the year and in a very intentional way at the start of each year to think about what values are we uplifting, which ones feel true. Uh, Regularly when we're having to make a decision, either it's a tough decision or it's like an everyday decision, we often come back to our values and we use them. They're very much alive with us. We say like, gosh, is this really going to bring us and the students more joy, or are we really developing empathy through going through this particular activity, or does it feel like we're connecting with the natural world, but we're sort of superficial and we're not connecting with the natural world? So um, these values have just been so helpful to us to really feel like we show up to the work in the way that we want to. And folks have commented that when Leela and I talk about our work, we just sound really happy. And I think that's a piece of it. Like we're really happy. We really we love what we do. And I think a lot of that is because we're able to set these values and then again, like I said, use them as our compass. So equity and access is right at the forefront. We developed our program, we built it in a way that meant that garden-based learning was not going to be an add-on or a special or a club. And that's not to disparage any garden-based learning that happens as a club or an extra or a special or an option. Um, but we really wanted to say, like, how do we ensure that every kid gets to participate, whether or not their teacher is comfortable outside, whether or not they're receiving special services, whether or not they have after-school transportation. We just thought we need to have it as a core part of the kids' instructional day at school. So that's how we developed the program from the very beginning. And I think we'll get to a lot of the themes later as we're talking about other pieces. Leela, did you want to jump in with something there?
No,
Oh,
you're
okay.
doing
Sorry,
so great.
you just lit up, and I was like, oh, little bonus. I'll highlight joy too. It's just because something feels good and feels joyful, it doesn't mean it's not important. And I think sometimes in life and in school world, we're thinking so much about outcomes and we're thinking so much about like, is this important? Is this serious? Is this impactful? Is it standards aligned? And you can have all of those things and also have fun and also be joyful. And we've had some moments where we're like, gosh, just like, even recently, maybe 2 years ago, we had a part of our curriculum that was feeling a little bit off. And one of the interns that we had the joy of working with during that time brought to our attention, they said, I think it's just like not that fun. And we were like, oh, yeah, you're onto something. This is just not that fun. Like it was topically relevant and it was active and it was a lot of things, but it just wasn't that much fun. And we've gone back to do a major overhaul in that part. And then, oh, I will say, sorry, I really want to talk about all the values. This is the last one I'll talk about right now. No, two more. One is social justice, and I think a lot of folks come into garden-based and farm-based learning with a sense of how social justice and garden-based learning intersect. There are certainly many ways. One of the ways that we talk about it in our program is about having to do with like food access and land access and what it means to know how to grow your own food or and choose your own food and support yourself in that way, and how that there's power in being able to make those informed decisions and support yourself and your family in that way. And then connecting to the natural world uh, is really an overall value as well. Just, kids sometimes don't get opportunities outside of school to build a relationship with earth and rocks and soil and worms and birds and all the other things you serendipitously encounter in a garden space. So again, that's holding space for all children to be able to, as a right, not a privilege, access interacting with the earth so they can build that relationship. Now I'm really ready for the next slide.
Thanks, Jen. I could listen to you talk about this all day. I've said it before, I'll say it again. So I wanted to dive a little bit more deeply into some of the specific ways that we address equity and accessibility and inclusivity within our program. So Jen already spoke to the way that we developed this program, with the intention being that every student K through 6 would have access to the garden program, rather it being teacher-based or depending on what activities they had signed up for. We wanted to be something that all children could participate in. So we have sequentially added on a grade level every year. We'll speak to that more. But the way that we started was just with a small group of kindergarten classrooms. Our first year, we sent out an invitation to any kindergarten classroom that wanted to participate as a sort of pilot year. And then after a really successful first year, we have since had every single classroom participate, and we've added a grade level sequentially. So we did K and then K1 and then K2, 3. And now we've in our fourth year of working with all K through 6 students. And this has meant a lot of growing and changing and learning and adapting for us as our student population has changed and the grade levels changed. We've been developing new curricula. And it's taken a lot of collaboration with the classroom teachers, with community partners, and specifically to continue to meet the needs of the students that we're working with. We see these children in isolation. We see them about 5 times a year, maybe more. But the people who really know these kids the best are their classroom teachers, their paras, and their families. So when we have students who have certain needs, whether physical or otherwise, we work in close collaboration with their teachers to figure out how can this student best participate in the garden. That means a lot of phone calls before field trips with families to figure out what equipment we need. If there's a student who has wheelchair needs. And Jen shoulders a lot of that responsibility, but it's been a big learning curve for us, and we're continually learning. And there's still things that we don't always do as well as we want to, and that's an uncomfortable edge. That is a reality, and we are always trying to continue to learn, to adapt, and make these spaces as accessible and joyful for everyone across the board. We've also developed our garden spaces to be physically accessible spaces. So not only do we want to be appealing to students' different senses in a way that can engage many different types of learners with the crops that we're growing, with the types of activities that we're doing, but we've also laid out our gardens so that they are all ADA compliant and wheelchair accessible. So we have raised beds that are next to pathways where students who do require wheelchair access can still be working in our garden spaces. And our other beds are all spaced far enough apart that wheelchairs can pass through our garden beds. And then another way that we really think about not only equity and inclusivity, but also social justice is in the content that we share with children. Picture book reading is a large part of our garden lessons, and even children in higher grade levels, 5th, 6th grade, can still really connect to a book in the garden. It's a really lovely way to ground students and also bring in something that's familiar from their indoor classroom learning to make them feel more comfortable in a garden and outdoor learning space. And I'll go to the next slide just so you can take a look, but these are some of the books that we are actively using in our curriculum now. And we think a lot about choosing stories and books that are going to offer children a chance to see themselves reflected in the story and the narrative and the illustrations, and also offering a view into a window into other cultures and ways of being around the world. So we try to have a broad spectrum of ethnicities and races and cultures that are featured in the stories that we read with our children. We also think a lot about how we develop our lessons. So as I mentioned before, not only are we designing our gardens to be very sensory stimulating, having different smells and tactile experiences and visual stimulation as well, but we want all of our lessons to also be engaging different types of learners and different types of children. So we are often finding that children who might have a harder time learning in their classroom can dial in and really dig deep into our garden learning in a way that is different and sometimes easier. There are a lot of kids who can really connect with being in their bodies and being outdoors in a way that it's not always easy to do when you're inside a classroom all day. So it's cool to see different kids really thrive in the garden spaces who don't always feel like they are thriving in their classrooms. Um, and another big piece of what we're doing is having all of our materials that we send home and communicate with families translated. Um, and we will be reaching out to teachers to see which languages are spoken in each of their classrooms and making sure that if we ever have communications going home, that those communications are translated into all of those languages. I'll speak more to a special project we do with fourth grade students that requires a lot of heavy lifting around translation, but it's been so incredibly worth it to learn from many different cultures and communities that are here within our schools. And we also have a dual language immersion program inside of our schools. It's housed within one of our four elementary schools, dual language Spanish and English. And so I am a Spanish language learner, but actively trying to deliver any pieces of the lesson or lesson vocabulary in both Spanish and English. And something else that we've incorporated into our program is our own personal growth and development and learning in anti-racism trainings. And we also were lucky enough to participate in an ethnic studies course that was led by a group of educators in the Amherst and Pelham schools that worked with a group of teachers from across all of the buildings and grade levels to develop curricula to be culturally responsive and to learn how to engage children in a way that spoke to their own cultures and ways of communicating and truly getting to see kids and meet kids where they are rather than imposing our own ideas of what nature learning and food should be. Really getting a chance to learn from the kids that we're with as well. So we are continually trying to do that learning as well and reading and talking to others. And again, it's a growth edge that we are constantly on and doesn't always feel like we're nailing. And that's part of the process and something that we feel proud to be continually learning and doing. Jen, are there other things that you would add to that?
No, not at all, Leila. I think that was a beautiful summary. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Jen. And again, here are some books that we love, 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 love reading. If you need more book suggestions, we have a really long list of books that we love to read, but these are just a few that are spotlighted and are heavily featured in the lessons that we are leading right now with our students. Is this still me, Jen?
It's okay. I'm happy to hop in. So for our program offerings, we have so garden and classroom lessons. That means like the garden lessons are out in the garden spaces. So it's with the full classroom of kids. The students come out, their teachers, their paras, like anyone who is staffed in that classroom, comes out to the garden for those lessons. And those are the ones that are primarily happening in the fall and then in the spring. And then we have classroom-based lessons, and those are primarily happening in the winter. And so sometimes, folks are curious about how you can do garden-based learning year round in our climate. And yeah, we're in the winter time, we're not digging in the soil outside, but there's plenty of things that we can do inside. And with each grade level, we have, a theme, and it's kind of this spiraling theme where the stuff that the kids are doing in the winter, it's still connected to either plant parts or the functions of different parts of the plant, or it's connected to our cultural foods learning. But there's that theme that carries us from season to season to season, whether we're in the garden or in the classroom. We take farm field trips. Leila and I are just fresh back from a farm field trip this morning where two classrooms of kindergartners went to a local farm called Brookfield Farm, who've been a great partner with us for many, many years. Those farm field trips give us a chance to let kids explore their local community in different ways. You know, we live in a relatively rural area. We are surrounded by farmland. Many kids and families haven't visited a farm or been to a farm. They may be driven by and I don't, aren't sure how to interact with it. So one, we get the kids like into those spaces, and then two, this one, you know, gives us opportunities to just talk about different learning themes in different ways. Um, Other community collaborations, we have just the richness of our program is I can't underscore strongly enough how much the richness of our offerings is buoyed by community collaborations. So we have community collaborators. We're fortunate to live in a college and university town, so we've got close by folks in higher ed who have been wonderful partners. Those include um, UMass and the School of Stockbridge, and our friend and collaborator, Sarah Berquist, who runs the Sustainable Food and Farming over there. And in her coursework, through her coursework, we've been able to connect with students who have joined us for internships. And these college student interns just bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise, um, curiosity, energy, goodwill, all kinds of good stuff. So that's been a really beautiful community collaborator. And shout out to Kyle, who's with us today as an audience member and was an intern with us and is a total rock star in his own right in the farm to school world now. Also, we collaborate with folks at Amherst College, the Mead Museum of Art, and Book and Plow Farm there have been so generous with their time, their resources, their expertise in helping us do programming for our fourth grades and our fifth grades, connecting art to garden themes and to the land, and connecting us with food and art and components that are as part of our fourth grade curriculum. I'm being like sort of brief because I could just go into too much depth and we'll run out of time. But we'd be happy to talk to you more about what those community collaborations look like. And then school nutrition connections. Those include, oh, I should also say, well, so other community collaborations we work with, for our sixth grade program, we collaborate with Wheelhouse Catering, and they're a awesome business that they help teach our sixth graders how to prepare meals based on foods that the kids have grown in the gardens. That is a really awesome sort of like capstone experience that our sixth graders get to have with Wheelhouse in their professional kitchen. It's super cool. School nutrition. So our school nutrition office in the district, we this has taken many forms over many years and different phases of leadership. And we have done things like harvest, grow and harvest salad greens, and then those get collected and shared with the kitchens. We have done a fall harvest soup where we planted a variety of root vegetables that were we harvested them with the students and then delivered them to the kitchens. And the kitchens prepared this like really gorgeous harvest soup that was then served in every lunchroom across the district, including elementary and secondary, along with some like education around like, hey, this stuff like the kids in our schools grew this food, and trying to connect those dots about the land and the food in our local community. Um, and during the pandemic, our gardens were, continued to produce a lot of food. And so we harvested that and distributed it in kind of like a CSA type distribution. When the kids and families would go to meal distribution sites, we would have some fresh produce from the school garden. So that's taken many, many forms. We're excited about continuing to explore taste testing and continuing to explore other ways that we can help the cafeteria-based education piece feel differently integrated in with what the kids are doing in their classrooms and out in the gardens with us.
Totally. And here are just some photo highlights of some of these experiences. Our kindergarten field trip, which we were just doing this morning, and Fifth grade goes to Book and Plow every year. Sixth grade is the one that goes and works with the professional chefs at Wheelhouse Catering. Here are some of the highlights. That's that beautiful fall garden vegetable soup that Jen was speaking of, and Green Monster Pizza. And here
And
we are onto our curricula.
yeah, so here's our curriculum overview. As I mentioned, that we have a theme for each year. Um, and in kindergarten, roots, stems, and leaves, and nutrient cycling. We also do a little bit of kind of intro, like like what's alive? Like what does it mean to be a living thing? And then what do these living things need? And then we talk right about getting some of those basics around plant parts. First grade has a strong focus on seeds. So kids look at germination, they're looking at plant parts and functions, roots, stems, and leaves. So it just sort of builds on their base knowledge from kindergarten. Um, Grade two, talking about soil health, so tap roots, fibrous roots. The students sow a cover crop. They talk about erosion. They're looking at compost and nutrients and what does it mean to have healthy soil? Why do we want healthy soil? Um, Pollinators and ecosystems are part of our third grade themes. Fourth grade, we're looking at food histories and cultures. Fifth grade, indigenous people of the area and our relationships with the land and the history of the land. And sixth grade, some culinary explorations that are very specifically tied into the fourth and the fifth grade work around um, kids' experiences with the elders in their community and the foods that are special to them and to their special people. I'll say that K through three, the garden curriculum is like strongly aligned to the Massachusetts Science, Technology, and Engineering frameworks. And then grades four, five, and six, we're leaning more strongly into the Massachusetts History and Social Sciences frameworks.
And I'll just revisit our core values as well. This has been incredibly important for us in building buy-in and support from teachers, from administrators. We can clearly point to here are the standards that these lessons are helping to address to make it as easy of a lift as possible for teachers to join us in the garden so they can feel like the learning that they're doing there is building on and improving upon and making richer the learning that they're doing in their classroom. It's also helped us a lot with grant writing. And with all of that being said, we are meeting these standards and also our priority always is joy again. So while these things are the themes that are running through the work that we're doing, as Jen, sort of anecdotally shared earlier, sometimes we feel like we dive a little bit too deeply into like, okay, do we like check this standards box? And then we have to dial it back and be like, and are we doing it in a joyful way? So that's been a process for us and important in the evolution of this spiraling curricula that we've created. And we wanted to put a spotlight on our fourth grade curriculum in particular. This is something that we've been developing for the past 5 years and or 6 years maybe, and really highlights our program values of equity, inclusion, and also social justice, and has been really fun. And so much learning has happened both for us and with the kids that we're working with. So as Jen mentioned, in fourth grade, there's a deep dive into food and food cultures. And so we start the year talking about the foods that kids love to eat. What are the foods that are special to them and their families, the foods that they have special stories or traditions around. And they explore the garden and what's growing, and they connect those special foods to the garden. And are there ingredients in your special foods that are already growing or we could grow in our garden? And from there, they start to develop a list of interview questions in our second lesson. We read a wonderful book called Bring Me Some Apples and I'll Make You a Pie, a story by Edna Lewis, who is a world famous chef and cookbook author, and who was interviewed to write this story. And the kids read this book and then think about, okay, what are the questions that the author must have asked Edna to learn so much about the foods that are really deeply important to her and her family and her culture? And from there, the kids generate a list of their own questions that they would like to ask an elder in their own family or community to learn more about their own special foods. And between lessons 2 and 3, we give every child an interview packet, and this interview packet has been translated into every language spoken in every classroom. And they get to go home and they are invited to interview anyone, any elder in their family or community to learn a little bit more about the history of their food and their food cultures. Um, and from there, we sort of share out, we talk about those interviews, talk about the foods that were featured and the things that they heard about. And from that interview, the children then start to make a list of all of the crops that they would be potentially interested in growing in our garden. So they think about both the foods that are important to them and also the foods that are important to the people in their lives and their families. And we come up with a long list of all the food they'd like to grow. And then we think about, okay, what are the crops that are actually viable in our climate? What can work in a school garden setting? And the children go through a ranked choice voting process to choose crops to grow. And it's usually the case that each class will grow between 3 and 4 different crops. And so each school will have somewhere between 7 and 12 different crops growing in the garden. And every year it's different. And, um, we're growing everything ranging from rice and wheat to the beautiful purple shiso that's featured behind Jen and in your background right there, Thai basil, bok choy, potatoes, sweet potatoes, corn, mm, edamame, just like all over the place. And it's so fun and cool. And I have a background in farming, and I'm often with this curricula growing foods that I've never grown before. So our gardens are not always the most productive. And often it's the case that we plant these crops in the spring and they don't grow or they grow differently than we expected them to. And that's all part of the learning process and the richness of this curricula. There's an opportunity to talk about this is also part of farming. We planted this thing, we gave it the things that we thought that it needed, and it didn't grow. So what happened and what can we learn from that? Um, so the children, again, they choose the crops and then they are the ones to plant them in the spring. And we've been really lucky to develop some very cool community partnerships and collaborations with this project. As Jen mentioned, we have partnered with the Mead Art Museum at Amherst College, and they have been working with the art teachers in each of the schools to feature food ingredients that the children talk about in these elder interviews in some form of art. So this can look really different depending on the teacher, but sometimes they've done three-dimensional sculpture, they've done collage, they've done paintings, they've done, oh my gosh, so many mixed media, like playing cards. They've done like just really cool things where they've gotten to create art with these special foods, working with both the Mead and also their art teachers. And so here are just some of the materials that we've developed for this lesson. This is an example template of the interview that children have created. Again, it's different for every class depending on which questions they feel excited to ask. But these are just some of the questions in one of the interviews that the class has generated. And here are some really wonderful just excerpts from these interviews that we've gotten back in hard copy. And sometimes we get, just full written out recipes that are, been handed down generation after generation, and are like sacred in these families. So it's really, really cool to get to share these special recipes. And we've talked a lot about creating a cookbook with permission from the families because many of them are definitely classified as secret recipes. And here's some of the artwork that students have created with their art teachers. And you can see here again, many different forms of media, but these kids are getting to, again, celebrate these special foods in another way. And here are some of the books that we have been reading as part of this curricula. Again, we're reading Bring Me Some Apples and I'll Make You a Pie. Students also read Fry Bread, a Native American Family Story, which features a very special food to the author named Kevin, who is part of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. We've also talked about this work of art by Naima Penniman, and talking about how when people were stolen from West Africa and enslaved, sometimes they would weave seeds into their hair as a way of bringing their special foods with them wherever they went in the world, no matter the uncertainty that they faced. It was a form of resilience and a way that they could deeply connect to their home and their people and their culture, even though they were being stolen and taken from their land. And then the last book, Cultivating Plant Memories, is actually a book that the Mead Art Museum has been generating for us, featuring this student artwork. So every year, the Mead photographs these incredible works of art. They talk about the interviews, they remove excerpts from these interviews, and they create this beautiful color book, which every child gets a copy of. There are copies in our local library, and students get to go home with this really, really wonderful and professionally produced book that is a capstone for this project and learning they've been doing.
Right. All right, so strategies. We put this slide here really as like a catch-all because we knew that we wanted to be able to talk with you all about strategies today, and when we're talking extemporaneously about the program, like we tend to just talk about some of the strategies and maybe not hit all of them. So um, I'll just go through the list and skip any that we've already addressed, and then we'll be able to move into some questions from you all who are here as participants. So, overcoming implementation challenges. Initially, buy-in was a challenge for different reasons, like whether it's buy-in from higher levels in the district, like how much is this going to cost? Do we have the funding? Do we have the space? Do we have the maintenance capacity? From teachers, like these are precious instructional minutes, and sharing instructional minutes can feel hard. Maybe folks don't particularly want to be doing outdoor learning with their students. So um, we've had to do just try a number of different things to overcome those. For teacher buy-in, as Leela alluded to earlier, um, I surveyed all teachers as the garden program was sort of starting to launch, meaning like we had garden bed spaces, but there was no like organized, coordinated use of them. So, in my role as science coordinator, I reached out to teachers and I asked, among other things, like, what do you need to, or what would you want in order to be able to use those spaces? And overwhelmingly, folks responded, we're excited to use the spaces, but we need an expert to lead it. Um, and so, enter Leela. So, Leela as our expert and as our garden educator, um, it's a cornerstone of what we're doing because it's not just a garden curriculum that gets handed to each classroom teacher and then adds to their teaching load, but it's an invitation. So the on-ramp is it's like shorter and less steep as a result. Um, for overcoming some challenges around funding, I mean, I look for grants just all the time. I'm just always scanning for grants. Um, and we've been mindful in like not growing too quickly. So it's like, I don't know, we always start with like, what do we want to do? As opposed to like, what can we do with what funding we're given? We're like, let's just start with what we want to do. And then we try to figure out the funding piece. Well, how can we put together enough grants to do that thing that we really want? Or is this an opportunity to like really scale back and just make sure that we can build something that has a sustainable foundation with the existing funding? Um, and for maintenance, we stay in close communication with maintenance and facilities department in our district. And we continue to work on that to figure out like how do we not step on each other's toes? Is this shared space? There's some like shared duties and responsibilities. And so that really comes down to having you know, trying to have a lot of grace and patience. And it's a lot of email communication, which can be challenging because, email is not always just the best way to work things out. So, but keeping a really good, positive relationship with maintenance and facilities is super important because they're out helping with these spaces as well. For year-round garden lessons, I already alluded to the curriculum that we've developed for winter time and indoor times. Um, and then building community partnerships. I talked about building this internship program, which is in our eighth, did we say, Leela? I think our eighth year maybe of an internship
Maybe
program.
ninth.
Ninth year of our internship program. And that has helped with our bandwidth and our sustainability. It's, Leela and I are the two people who work on the garden program from within the district. And so, um, we receive a lot from the internship program, and then our obligation in our own minds that we want to just be sure that we're offering as much back. So when we're working with each intern, we work really closely with them to figure out, like, what are their goals and how can we show up to provide access to information and experiences and other things that are going to help them along in their own growth. Uh, Field trips, building those community partnerships through field trips. I have to think a little bit about all of those. I mean, I think it's often just reaching out and asking, and sort of like coming to a group with an idea and saying like, hey, we're sort of thinking about this. Would you be interested in talking it through with us? We tend to just sort of like have a like, hey, why not? Like the worst someone could say is no. And so we do a lot of like reaching out and asking. And then once we find a partner or partners who are just so awesome to work with, that we put energy into that relationship to make sure that we have a healthy relationship and a balanced relationship and it doesn't feel extractive. And um, that just gives us a chance to continue to build and grow. Um, yeah, any points that you want to add that are specific to strategy, Leela?
I would just add too that if anyone's interested in hearing more about summer garden maintenance, we're happy to touch on that. I mean, Jen mentioned year garden
Mm-hmm.
maintenance and communicating with facilities. But summer maintenance, as everyone knows with school gardens, is its whole own thing. We've tried many different things. So happy to speak more to that. And also in terms of the way that we have developed our program to now be primarily district funded. As Jen said, we are always looking for grants. We've applied to and received many grants, but our the vast majority of our program is now funded by the district, but we had to work up to that, and that was a 10-year process that's continually evolving. But if there are specific questions about any of these things, we're really, really happy to dive in with you all, um, either in this setting and also um, feel free to reach out. We have our information shared here. So if there are things that you would like to ask us about specifically, happy to connect.
There was so much incredible detail in that, Leela and Jen. Thank you so much. I'm sure that it will bring up many questions from people who view the webinar later, and a lot of our institute teams that I'll be sending this out to as well, who are establishing programs in their own schools and districts. And so again, the chat is open if anyone wants to drop anything in it.
And I'll also invite you again to that, I am certainly not standing in any position where I'm saying I know answers, but I'm happy to be a thought partner with folks, and we're happy to like workshop something through with you. So if you did attend today with the hopes of either learning something in particular that we haven't addressed, or there's like a situation or a challenge or an opportunity that you're facing, and you'd like some other brains on the problem with you, it's absolutely appropriate to share this space now to talk about that as well.
And Jen and Leela, are you willing, if someone who views this webinar is curious, they can reach out to you with these email addresses?
Definitely, please do.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's very
definitely.
generous.
I'll add to, I'll say one more thing about building community partnerships. I know Jen spoke to reaching out and asking people if they would like to be involved or to collaborate and seeing who says yes. But our overwhelming experience has been that people say yes. I think something that we've learned from this is that institutions, nonprofits, colleges, universities, so many places are really looking to connect with children, with schools, and we have found a lot of people that are really, really willing to dive in with us. So if there's any hesitancy in seeking community partnerships, I think our overwhelming experience has been that it's been really positive and people are really, really excited to work with us.
I'll just chime in to say with families as well. Sometimes we've come in with like a specific ask. for oftentimes like garden maintenance support with families. And families have just been so generous with their time as well. So that's another, community partner that I don't want to overlook, that they're volunteers who provide that support in addition to sort of the behind the scenes stuff that like helps ensure that when the kids are at school out in the gardens, that the gardens are functional spaces.
I just want to add that if you want to hear even more from Leela and Jen, we did record a podcast with them. We have, if you don't know, we have a podcast called Farm to School Northeast, which highlights exciting stories from schools, cafeterias, and community around farm to school in the Northeast region. And Jen and Leela shared this and more. So I put the link in the chat. And if you're interested, please share it out with people as well. It's about 30 minutes. So if you're driving somewhere and you want to hear a little bit more of their program and their journey, please tune in. And you do have something in the chat. Um,
Yeah.
I'll read it out loud so people who are watching the webinar will hear. It says, first off, you two are my heroes. This is a high-level program development question. I'm curious what pros and cons you see for programs like yours that are facilitated within the district versus programs where garden coordination, lesson facilitation is contracted. For example, School Sprouts in Northampton or Mill City Grows in Lowell, Island Grown on the Vineyard, etc.
Great question, Kyle.
I know. It is a great question. Um, we were like Leland and I were just talking about this either earlier this week or last week about the model of having a district, a program that is like based in the district, and then what it is like to have like an outside contracting party come in. So I have to like think, like I don't have an answer, boom, but I'm gonna just like think about it. And Leela, please jump in like as you're thinking and as like the specific pros and cons come in. I mean, what's one thing that's really, really tricky for us, it's the funding piece is challenging, and but that's we don't totally know would it be so different if the garden program existed outside of the district, but within the district, in a public school system, there's like a real vulnerability to a program like ours and to, like so many components of what's happening with school budgets being reduced and just a limited access to funds. So we sometimes wonder if there's different stability and different fiscal stability for programs that exist as outside entities or as nonprofits. Um, but I don't really know the experience of the nonprofits to know if they really feel like they have fiscal security either. It's maybe we're both feeling vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt, I think it can work really well either way. I mean, look, the examples that you listed, for example, I think are really successful examples of outside facilitation that feels like really rich and deeply meaningful for that school community. I think a pro that I've experienced as a district employee working within the district is I do feel like I have a real connection to not only the students, but also the teachers, the staff of the school. I feel like I have a sense of belonging, which also I think makes the learning meaningful. And not to say that you can't achieve that as an outside facilitator, but that's been a pro that I have experienced.
Mhm.
And also feeling like there's some ownership, like the classroom teachers and the children, I think feel like um, I am a part, I'm integrated into their school experience. And it's also, I think, been easier to create some of the avenues of communication that we've talked about in terms of school nutrition collaboration and collaboration with the families at home. Like we have access to like we can communicate with families at home, which I think might be more challenging as an outside facilitator. So we have some of these sort of access points, which I think enables us to dive deeply with students in a way that might be more challenging as an outside facilitator. But again, not having had the experience of being that, it's hard to speak to that
Mhm.
comparison.
Yeah, I'll build on that comment, Leela, because I was thinking about something similar, which is just sort of the when you are immersed in the culture of a school and of a district, it's hard to predict what connections you will encounter, but they're continual. So, we might be working on something and I'll say, oh, like that school this year is really having a school-wide focus on such and such. And so there's a way that we can bring that language into these lessons. Or I'm trying to think of another concrete example. Uh, tying into like school-based assemblies and things. It's just really like a way to, as Leela was saying, like really be more deeply woven into the fabric of the schools and of the district. Being that we are within, we tend to bump into folks who say that they find like the way that we approach this unique because we are school based and that we don't have a ton of other um, alike models where folks have this position. Although you're starting to see some school districts have like a farm to school coordinator type position who can maybe they're also coordinating the communications with a nonprofit who's coming in to offer the lessons, but maybe they are doing garden-based learning like as the educator as well. So I think we're beginning to see like um, a wider variety of different ways that people plug in. But it's like it's a really, really excellent question, and we circle back to this question a whole lot. Probably the answer is like there's not a best way, and there's different sets of opportunities and challenges for each, and then yeah.
Happy to talk more about it too.
Great. Thank you. Hopefully, Kyle, that covered a lot of what you were thinking about. So are there any other questions from people who are listening? Oh, Kate Stafford
Mm.
asked, I came a bit late, but I'd love to hear about summer maintenance. Thanks.
Yeah, happy to speak to that. Thanks for asking that, Kate. We've tried so many different things, and that ranges from having families volunteer to sign up to adopt a week of garden maintenance. And we've generally had plenty of success having families volunteer to do that. That requires then us leading a garden training and maintenance training for all the interested families before the school year ends, so they know how to access all of the tools that they need and the garden sheds and the hoses. And um, that has certainly been successful and also um, has come with challenges of reliability and people's schedules change and other commitments pop up, and so it's hasn't always been it's a little bit of a grab bag of what we come back to in the fall with that kind of maintenance. There have been summers where we've done the garden maintenance ourselves, which um, is not super tenable. Um, we've done a lot of like garden volunteer maintenance days where people have like a big crew of people have come in at once to do a whole bunch of garden work. But the model I think that we're really excited about and are hoping to lean into more in the future is this past year, for the first year, we piloted a a stipended summer garden stewardship position, where we made it available to high school students at Amherst Regional High School. Um, and we were able to procure some money from the Amherst Garden Club and from the Pelham, Jen, help me out here, from
Pelham Community Garden Committee.
thank you. And they generously donated funds to us that we could pay these students to take care of our gardens over the summer. So they were small stipends, but these were kids that mostly were excited to connect with the gardens and to be doing something that felt meaningful for them. And so we had three awesome garden stewards who all summer took care of our gardens for a full 8 weeks. They were there every week, watering, weeding. We had to train them on how to take care of the spaces as well. But um, there's like a lot of red tape and getting that off the ground, but we feel really excited about the possibility of not only connecting this type of learning to older students, but also being able to compensate the students for their work. It feels like a really deep connection to make. And also, our gardens were more fruitful and cleaner this fall than they have been in years. And it was amazing to come back to these spaces with lots of food growing. And it was awesome. It felt like such a huge success. So we'll keep you posted on how it goes in future years. We've only done it once, but that feels like a big win for our program so far. Would you add to, are there other things we've tried, Jen?
No, I'm just smiling, thinking about how gorgeous the gardens looked when we came back this fall. Like, unlike anything we've ever encountered. Really, really, the students, the garden stewards just did such a great job. You know, they went through an application process and an interview with us. They went through the training that Leela mentioned. And you know, we've worked hard to figure out like when after sixth grade, um, the garden program stops and it can feel kind of abrupt. And we've tried to find ways to help garden-based learning and farm to school themes continue to find their ways to the students in the secondary level. But this felt like a really nice way to reach back out to the students and welcome them into the space where we do have a little bit more control over how we can provide access.
I love I love that Garden Stewards program. It's exciting. Well, I want to be cognizant of time and of your time, Leland and Jen, after being at work all day and being so amenable to being on this webinar. And to all of you who are watching, thank you for coming. And for those of you who are going to watch the webinar, thank you for watching the webinar. And if you have any questions to follow up with Jen or Leela, they are on the screen, and I will be sending this slideshow out as well. So thanks everyone for joining today.
Yeah, thanks folks for joining. Dinah, thanks so much for the opportunity to share. And we mean it. Please reach out if you want to talk garden-based learning with us. We're always excited to meet with folks and share ideas.
Totally. Thank you, Dinah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Leela. Thanks, Jen.